My grandfather's lost journal. The fog obscures your view of the destination, much like the lack of purpose blinds your direction in the first place. There was once a time when everything felt grounded, rooted in reality, trying desperately not to be torn away. My grandfather wasn't a man you'd describe as unusual. He often spoke of the same issues most Americans face. Money troubles, politics, family, but nothing ever out of the ordinary. That's why it's so hard for me to write this now. The weight he carried, the chains that bind him even in death, revealed a side of him I could barely understand. There was a darkness in him, a shadow of something deeper. He'd lived at the boundary of life and death, a purgatory neither here nor there. And now, because of him, I find myself standing at that same threshold. The trials ahead of me are heavy, suffocating. Help me. Not with your actions, but with your thoughts, your condolences. That's the least I can remember now. This all began on my grandfather's deathbed. For weeks, Atlas Jones had been slipping in and out of consciousness, barely able to whisper a request for food or water. It was as though he'd surrendered, letting life slip away. I sat by his side during those long, agonizing weeks, reminding him how much he meant to me, how he had stepped in as a father figure when my own father abandoned me. I idolized my grandfather in every way, but I knew this was the end of his time, and with it, the end of a part of me. Then, out of nowhere, his voice cut through the silence, clear and steady, like he hadn't been bedridden for weeks. "Ronan," he said, "I've got some debts to pay. Take this." He pressed a worn leather journal into my hands. "Find the key to victory that I couldn't. Go, my boy. What's waiting for me isn't going to be pleasant, but I'm grateful for the time we've had together. This journal, it'll answer questions I can't explain now." I barely had time to process his words before the shrill sound of the life support machine filled the room. Nurses rushed in, working desperately to save him, but I already knew he was gone. Those were his last words, the last truth he could share. Grief washed over me like a tidal wave. I felt hollow, lost. The world seemed to lose all its color, leaving me an empty shell of the person I'd been before. In my despair, I clung to the only thing he left me, the journal. The cover was cracked and worn, the pages weathered like they'd survived a century of hardship. I opened it carefully, flipping through the brittle pages. Strange, abstract drawings filled the margins, symbols and figures I couldn't make sense of. I stopped myself before I delved too deeply and turned back to the first page. Entry 1, November 8th, 1937. My name is Atlas Jones, and I reckon it's time I jot down some peculiar happenings here on my family's homestead. Hard as it is to believe, I can't deny what I've seen and felt. Today, as I wandered through the woods with my dog, Nova, something unusual caught my eye, a path I'd never noticed before. Curiosity got the better of me, so I followed it. It led me to a riverbank, untouched and hidden from the world. The scene was alive with turtles, fish, and other critters, like a secret paradise. The water was so clear I couldn't resist diving in. That's when I heard it, a voice. "Hello," a young girl said. Startled, I raised my head above the surface and saw her. She looked about my age. Nervous, I stammered, "I'm sorry, am I on your property? I just found this place today, I swear." She smiled warmly. "No, you're fine. My property's just across the river. Want to come see it?" "Sure," I said, wading out of the water. "I'm Atlas, by the way. What's your name?" "Lyra," she replied, extending her hand. "I'm 19. You look to be about the same age, am I right?" "Close, I'm 17. People say I look older, though," I replied. "Strange I haven't seen you at the high school. We live in the same district, don't we? The next school's 30 miles off." Lyra shook her head. "I was homeschooled. My mother never saw a reason for me to go. But what about you, Atlas? Why are you out here wandering the woods instead of at a baseball game or with your friends?" "Well," I began, "I guess I'm just curious. The forest feels unknown, unlike the rest of the world, where you can predict the headlines in the newspaper or the score of a ball game. Out here, there's always something new to discover." Lyra nodded thoughtfully. "That's an interesting way to see it. But let me ask you this. What if those predictable things could change? But only if you showed up. I've spent so much time out here, I sometimes feel like I've given my mind to these trees." She chuckled softly. "Maybe I'm overthinking it, but at least we've got some common ground, right?" As we walked, a large, weathered homestead appeared. The two-story house seemed like it had stood through centuries, its earthy tones blending into the forest. "Lyra, how old is this place?" I asked, staring at the structure. "My mother says it was built in the early 1700s by German colonists. It's been remodeled over the years," she replied, scanning her home as though seeing it anew. "Would it be all right if I met your mother? I don't want to be rude, being on her property without her knowing." "She's not here today. Lyra said, skipping toward the door. Maybe another time. Want to come inside? The scent of old wood filled my nostrils as I stepped inside. The house seemed both ancient and well kept, its walls lined with strange antique trinkets. I followed Lyra as she led me down into the basement, which was filled with shelves of exotic teas. She handed me a basket of tea packages. Here, take these. They're my favorites, she said before excusing herself to use the restroom. Alone, my eyes wandered. A peculiar jar caught my attention. A maroon liquid inside glowed faintly, almost alive. My curiosity was interrupted by a strange sensation, as though someone were watching me. I turned slowly to see Lyra peeking out from behind a wooden pillar, her grin unnervingly wide. She whispered, "You like that? You like that? You like that?" Startled, I tried to play it off with humor. "Maybe I do. Maybe you've got a potion in there for me," I joked, forcing a laugh. Lyra tilted her head, her smile softening. "Don't rule it out, but for now, I'd rather hear more about you, Atlas." Entry 1, November 8th, 1937. "Well, Lyra, I'd love to walk you back, but I better head home before my mother's pot roast gets cold," I said with a grin. "Of course. Let's get you back to your side of the river, trespasser," Lyra teased, her voice dripping with playful sarcasm. To be honest, there's not much to tell about myself, apart from my curiosity for the unknown. I've got 4 books on the first expeditions into the Amazon rainforest. The idea of a boundless world just fascinates me, I remarked. "Ah, the Amazon. I faced many terrors there myself. A strange platform for anomalies, that place," Lyra replied, a flicker of uncertainty in her tone. "What do you mean? We're in Utah, Lyra. How could you know anything about the Amazon rainforest?" I asked, laughing at her strange comment. "Oh, you're right. I must be getting tired," she said, brushing it off. Then, with a twinkle in her eye, she added, "Will I see you tomorrow, Atlas?" "Of course, Lyra. You be safe walking home now," I said, meeting her gaze warmly. As I ate my mother's pot roast that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something magical about meeting Lyra. Everything seemed perfect, too perfect. But I'll leave the speculation for my next journal entry. Entry 2, November 9th, 1937. I woke in a cold sweat after a peculiar dream. I was running aimlessly through the forest at night, pursued by unseen beings I could feel, but not see. Their presence clung to the air like a shadow I couldn't escape. After breakfast, I decided to return to the spot where I met Lyra. Strangely enough, before I even reached the river, a hand emerged from a bush ahead, offering to help me climb the steep terrain. Startled, I jolted back, but before panic could set in, Lyra appeared, laughing at my reaction. "I'm sorry if I startled you, tough guy," she said, chuckling. "I'll take the hit for that one," I replied sheepishly. I could have handled that better. "No worries, Atlas. You'll get a chance to redeem yourself. I'm going to show you something I've never shared with anyone before. Just promise me you won't freak out." "As long as it doesn't involve making me a human sacrifice," I joked. Lyra led me down a steep ridge to a clearing where wooden sculptures stood like ancient sentinels, untouched by time. "Lyra, your work is incredible, but don't you think placing this stuff in the middle of nowhere might give someone the wrong idea? It could really spook people," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "Atlas, I didn't make these," she replied, her voice tinged with awe. "I found them here. They've been waiting, untouched. There's something ancient and ethereal about this place. I feel nostalgic here, as if I've been here before." I approached one of the humanoid sculptures, brushing my hand against its surface. A chill crept up my arms, and a deep foreign unease settled in my stomach. Before I could speak, a piercing humanoid screech echoed around us. We froze, then bolted for her house. I slipped on a rock, pain shooting through my leg, but Lyra helped me up, her face pale with fear. "It was probably a feral hog," Lyra said, her voice trembling. "They can make some strange noises." "I've lived in these woods my whole life," I replied. "That wasn't a hog. What's really going on here, Lyra? And how did you find me yesterday?" "I told you, I just stumbled across you," she said, visibly shaken. "Atlas, I hate to admit this, but I believe these woods are haunted by ancient spirits, dark ones. Maybe another world is bleeding into ours. I have something that might help." Back at her home, she lit a bundle of white sage, the smoke filling the room with a purifying scent. "Great," I muttered. "This might help, but honestly, I think we're overthinking things. Maybe it's all in our heads." Lyra didn't respond. Instead, she pulled out her diary, filled with sketches of fragmented, shadowy entities. My blood ran cold when I turned the page and saw a drawing of myself, surrounded by a dark, ominous cloud. "Lyra, why would you draw something like this?" I asked, trying to mask my fear. "Atlas, something dark is attached to you. It doesn't want to destroy you, it wants you. It's feeding off your life force. I can help, but you have to trust me, she pleaded. I'm going home, I said, standing. I appreciate your concern, but I don't want to be involved in this. It's not personal. I'm just not feeling myself today. Whatever you think of me, Atlas, I'm here to help. I'll keep you in my prayers, Lyra said softly. Walking home, I couldn't shake a growing sense of dread, a darkness foreign and all-consuming. I'll avoid the woods for now, but part of me fears I've dug too deep into something I wasn't meant to uncover. Entry 3, November 16th, 1937. It has been over a week now, and I must confess, I am utterly exhausted. My nerves are frayed, my strength depleted. I've drawn so deeply from my own reserves of adrenaline that I scarcely feel steady anymore. Since last I laid eyes upon Lyra, my nights have been plagued by nightmares, visions of shadowy woods, moonless and impenetrable, where dark humanoid figures pursue me endlessly, intent on erasing me from this world and the next. I've tried all manner of remedies keeping to the town, avoiding the woods and even Lyra herself, occupying my time with friends, but nothing has eased my distress. The thought gnaws at me that perhaps I am approaching an inevitable truth, one I'd much rather deny. There may be more to this world than I've ever dared to believe. This fog of melancholy and dread left me no choice but to seek out Lyra once more. I needed answers closure to this waking nightmare. As I ventured into the woods, the whispers began. Malignant voices hissed from unseen corners, reminding me that your end lies beyond this world and beyond understanding. The meaning escaped me, though I took it as a threat, a grim one at that. Even so, I pressed on, fixing my gaze upon the setting sun ahead, a final bastion of beauty amidst the torment of my thoughts. There was still bravery in my heart, though it felt like it might slip through my grasp at any moment. My reflection was abruptly shattered by the brush of something against my hair. I looked up to see the horror. Dozens of mutilated deer strung upside down from the trees, their lifeless forms swaying, their grotesque remains brushing my shoulders. My stomach turned violently. Before I could scream, I vomited everything I had within me. Atlas, come! Lyra's voice rang out in the distance, sharp and commanding. I wiped my mouth and set aside my terror, running toward the sound of her call. But no matter where I turned, I could not find her. Lyra, I cried. Call again, louder, so I might find you. Her voice came low and calm, yet somehow chilling. Right behind you, Atlas. I turned and found her standing there, her face pale and stricken with an expression I could not place. I opened my mouth to scold her for sneaking up on me in such a manner, but I stopped short. Something weighed heavily upon her, and I knew it was far more important than my own indignation. Lyra, I demanded, what in God's name were those deer? Who's behind this madness on our property? I need answers, and I need them now. She held my gaze, unbroken and resolute. It is time you meet my mother, Atlas. Time for you to learn the truth of why fate has brought you to me. Without another word, she turned and led me deeper into the woods. The path grew narrow and dark, the light slowly fading until it was little more than a memory. My soul seemed to dim with it, a weight pressing heavily on my chest. We reached a clearing, and my breath caught in my throat. This was no ordinary place. It was the very realm from my nightmares. Desperately, I pinched myself, certain this must be some cruel dream. But no amount of pain woke me. Lyra stopped and pointed ahead. There, crouched by a fire, sat an ancient woman, her form decrepit and her face twisted by years of suffering. My fear was tempered only by my need for answers. I rushed forward. Who are you? I demanded, my voice trembling. Why am I enduring these horrors? What do you want from me? The old woman's voice rasped like wind through dead leaves. Through centuries new and old, every 15th blue moon, our shaman is drawn to these lost lands, unknowing yet destined. You, Atlas, are the reincarnation of our shaman. Bow to your purpose. At her words, 1,000 dark humanoid figures emerged from the shadows, bowing low in reverence. Tribal music, haunting and primal, filled the air, echoing across the strange plain. I yelled for help, but the louder I screamed, the louder they chanted in praise. Then, a memory flooded back to me. At the age of 10, my great aunt visited our homestead, bringing native artifacts and tales of a distant ancestor who had married into a tribe during the colonization of the West. Could this cursed bloodline be my own? Was I truly part of some spiritual conspiracy to revive a long-lost culture? The notion was absurd, and yet, if I were to accept this role, what would my task be? I asked, barely able to form the words. The old woman's face twisted into a cruel smile. It is no choice of yours. It is your birthright. A vision seized me then, vivid and terrible. I saw myself leading cults in worship of an unknown entity, demanding sacrifices to trap souls in a purgatory of eternal torment. The wrath of this spirit was tied to the stolen lands of the colonizers. Those who fell into its grasp would suffer alongside their ancestors until the tribe's lands were restored. In the midst of the vision, my grandfather's face appeared, crumbling into dust. When the vision ended, a hand rested firmly on my shoulder. I turned to see my grandfather, long dead, his face marked with sorrow. "Grandson," he said, his voice heavy with regret, "you must take the throne. We are cursed to perpetuate this cycle, to sabotage our own until the end of time. There is no escape." "Granddaddy, how in the hell were you acting as a shaman without any of us knowing, and why would you agree to such evil?" I demanded with intensity that couldn't be matched by anyone I've ever known. "These humanoid creatures you see bowing down to you as we speak will cover your every track up as they did for me. And let's just say that if you don't, everyone out of your immediate family will be damned to this hellish realm. I chose you and your father's grandson. I know I'm not a human worth of existence, but I did what anyone else would have done for his family. I'm truly sorry, but now the burden is yours, grandson." I couldn't believe what was coming out of his mouth, but it was my decision to make now. Would I allow my father and little brother to perish into a hellish purgatory after their lives are done? "Grandfather, I guess it's my time to take your throne," I said, shaking and crying in agony. "You did what all of us did too. You aren't a demon when faced with such a burden that can't be undone. Just remember why you're doing this. Don't allow yourself to think that you're a demonic monster that loves what he does. You had no choice. Good luck to you in operating in this realm and the next my grandson." My grandfather then hugged me and showed me all of his compassion to reassure me that I wasn't the first to experience such a burden. Our family reunion was cut short as the old woman yelled in an ancient language. As she did, I was handed a wooden spear and my grandfather bent to his knees commanding me to strike him down. "Don't feel sorry for me, my grandson. I have the pleasure of being put to rest unlike the souls I damned in this realm." Without allowing myself to delve into deep thought, I struck my grandfather down and took the throne. I looked to my right and saw the old women then hand me a feathered crown and bow down to my feet, along with all of the dark humanoid creatures I encountered. Lyra smiled at me and muttered the words, "You'll make a fine shaman, future husband." I then awoke in the middle of the forest back in my world. I ran to see if Lyra's house still existed, and yet I saw nothing. As I headed back over the river, I thanked the universe that it was all just a weird hallucination that I had. I was overwhelmed with a sense of relief until Lyra lay in front of me behind the visible trees and said, "Where do we begin?" Entry 4, November 16th, 2024. It's been so long since I last wrote in this godforsaken journal. Today, I face my end wrought by the crimes I've committed against humanity and the darkness I embraced to protect my family from the horrors of the other realm. Countless souls were damned because of me. And now, Ronan, my grandson, the burden falls to you. Will you strike me down, Ronan, as I did to my grandfather and as he did to his? At the end of the day, the choice is yours. I leave this journal so you'll remember, you're not alone in this cursed burden. If you decide, like all of us did, to shield our family from the wrath of that realm, then come find me. Strike me down and set me free from my sins. That is the final entry in my grandfather Atlas's journal. I've struggled to make sense of it, torn between dismissing it as the ravings of a broken man and fearing deep down that it might all be true. It's hard to accept, but part of me believes my grandfather had been grappling with untreated mental illness since he was 17. Yet another part of me, a darker, quieter part, worries about the validity of his story. In my grief and respect for his memory, I've decided to visit the coordinates listed in the journal, a remote forest in Utah where the supposed ceremony is meant to take place. I'll see for myself if any of this is real. I'll keep you updated. Could it really be my turn to take the throne? Well, that was pretty much it. I hope you liked the story till then. Bye-bye.